Oh, what a mess.
This is Neil Schneider from Meant to Be Seen. Welcome to my messy basement. This is going to be a short episode, okay? I'm going to make it up to you next week. I just wanted to actually talk about an interview I saw with Jack McCauley. He's co-founder of Oculus VR. He was interviewed in US Gamer. I thought it was an excellent interview because he talked about the early beginnings of Oculus, as well as the management team, and it was a really good fly-on-the-wall type of interview, and I really recommend everyone read it. I just want to share some comments and remarks on things he shared during the interview. Now, what he did was he remarked that, while he was at Oculus, he was very concerned about Sony. In particular, he thought that Sony is or was a very big threat to Oculus. He also remarked that he would like to see Oculus working with Xbox. That he sees the potential behind that because there's about 15 million Xbox Ones out there, and if they get an attach rate of about 10% of the Xboxes, then there could be about 1.5 million Oculus Rifts. In the console world. And finally, he mentioned that there are 17 million qualified gaming rigs very much capable of running the Oculus Rift today. I thought that was a big number, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this is my reaction to what Jack McCauley said. Now, I'm learning day to day. I learn something new every day. I'm having trouble seeing, why or how Sony is a direct threat to Oculus, or I don't really see it, and these are the reasons why. Sony is console. It's very much a lockdown platform. I haven't seen any real evidence that Sony is planning to pursue the PC virtual reality market, but there's a more fundamental reason why I don't see Sony as a threat, and that's because their hardware, in particular their head-mounted display or the PSVR, is very much defined by the abilities of the console. So in the PC world, you can have all kinds of head-mounted displays with all kinds of resolutions, and depending on your computer's configuration, you can have readily available processing power, to drive that. But in the console world, it's very much a cookie cutter type of industry where all the consoles are very much the same, within the PS4 universe. And, the processing power is limited by that. You can't just add extra processing power on a whim. So I just don't see how Sony could stray into the PC space. Because, if they do that by increasing resolution and field of view and extras that you expect in the PC world, it takes away from their core market. I just have difficulty seeing that. Now, what I do see happening is if Sony is successful, and I have every reason to believe they will be with their PSVR head-mounted display and platform, I think this is going to mean really amazing things for Oculus and HTC and every virtual reality head-mounted display in the PC space, because Sony's success would actually prove that there is demand for virtual reality in a big way. I mean, if there's enough headsets sold, if there's enough content sold on a regular basis, that's a big deal. Because let's look at the market as it is. In the console world, you've got gamers. They want a good experience, but they also want a very affordable experience. They want a single, console unit that, has a specific head mount that works a certain way. They want, good to great experiences, but it has to be affordable, and it's for the living room. You look at the PC space, and if we're talking about the hardcore PC gaming market, we're talking about gamers that are spending top dollar on graphics cards and processing power. They want the experiences to go with them. So, the two sides of the fence, they're not, really the same market. It's a very different type of community. But the commonality between them is virtual reality. And if virtual reality takes off in the console world, then it's very likely that we would see a relative success in the PC world. And we're already seeing this in other types of markets. Like, for example, just video games alone. I mean, yes, they're coded on PC, they're optimized for console, and then they're ported to PC. So what happens? Well, of course, you've got a big success in console, and you have a relatively big success in PC. They each find their own ecosystem. So this VR is very much the same. So from Oculus VR's point of view or HTC's point of view, I really think that if Sony has a huge success, that's going to translate well to their businesses. Now, the other thing to consider is, just to turn the tails a bit here, is that in the lifetime of the PlayStation 4, in a great situation, they could hope to have maybe 100 million units in the overall lifetime of the PS4. Okay, right now they're at just over 36 million. In the PC space, okay, within a few years, provided the processing requirements don't go up from the display makers or the head-mounted display makers, they could have a reach of hundreds of millions of PCs, or at least a potential reach of hundreds of millions of PCs. Console can't effectively do that. So this is, again, I just don't see the threat. Maybe my opinion will change, but at this point, I just don't see the threat from Sony to Oculus or HTC. The markets are just too different, and the fundamentals are so different. I just don't see it. Now, I do agree, though, that Xbox would be a good strategic partner for Oculus VR or another HMD maker. I do see that. Something to think about, though, is that based on what I've read, the Sony PlayStation 4 GPU chip is significantly faster than the Xbox One equivalent. From what I read, it's 50% faster, so that's significant. And even with this advantage, it's rumored that PlayStation or Sony is working on an updated PlayStation 4, which is more processing power, better suited for virtual reality and 4K television. So, even with this advantage, it looks like Sony could be looking at even more processing power in the short term. So if Xbox does turn out to be the right partner for Oculus or for HTC or for whomever, and they do choose to move ahead, Xbox One may have to do some extra work to make a VR a viable option for them. Last point, during the interview, Jack McCauley said that there were 17 million, powerful gaming desktop computers ready for an Oculus Rift, and I just can't get behind this figure right now, because 17 million is really the entire hardcore PC gaming market. I mean, that's pretty much everyone who's a gamer buying these top tier graphics cards and motherboards and CPUs and the kit and caboodle. My opinion, at least through 2016, is, and I've been very public about this, is the 3 million figure, where there's, at most 3 million qualified PCs ready and willing to work with an Oculus Rift or an HTC Vive. Now, there could be more. I mean, it's not an exact science. This is based on GPU it's an extrapolation based on GPU sales data we got from John Petty Research. But I think it's, I just don't see a difference in numbers which are magnitudes apart. It's just 17 million is just too high a figure, in my opinion. Now, the good news, though, is, that 17 million figure will be achievable in 3 years. And 3 years can go by pretty fast. Because if now we're at 3 million, remember, it's all based on Moore's Law. Moore's Law dictates that every 2 years, the circuitry on a GPU or a CPU chip doubles. Okay? So within 3 years, I think it's very feasible that those powerful, discrete graphics cards are going to be in a mass market category, or at least a very affordable category that most gamers will own them. Now, if we could go a little further, let's say 5 years, perhaps maybe 6 years, I think it's feasible that those top grade graphics cards will be affordable enough, and the technology will be, the manufacturing technology will be good enough that we may actually see them on the combined CPU, GPU dies or APUs, or embedded on a motherboard. Just so you know, embedded GPUs, there's about 300 million of them sold each year, and that's not including console. That's based on John Petty research data. So that's a lot of PCs because it's one-to-one relationships once it's on a motherboard between the GPU and the computer or the PC. So that's the future. There is a catch though. If the resolution is set too high, so let's say the display makers say, oh, you know what, we're not happy with 2K, we want 4K or we want 8K. Every time they increase the resolution or the field of view, that adds more processing demands, which means, the clock gets reset. You're no longer having a potential reach of hundreds of millions. Now you're back to that, that 3 million figure. So the industry is going to have to find a careful balance between what their displays require and what the GPUs and the processing power can ultimately deliver. So we're going to have to wait and see. But I think there's a very promising future for PC VR, so much so that they could eventually make console a dwarf. But it has to be done properly. Anyway, end of the day, this was a great interview. I highly recommend reading it. Very, very informative. Now, for the big surprise of the day. So next week, we're going to be releasing the new Vireo Perception drivers. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Vireo Perception, these are open source, free drivers that let you take existing games and play them in virtual reality. We've been doing this for several years now, but this is our brand new architecture. It's been completely rewritten, and we're very excited about it. I'm even going to go so far that I really think they're going to redefine what people think a VR driver is capable of. We're really excited about this. Now, we have a full interview with Dennis Reichel, who's one of the core developers behind Vireo Perception. He's largely responsible for much of the architecture that's going to be showcased in this new version of Vireo Perception. So that full interview and the driver release is going to be next week, but here's an excerpt. Enjoy. DirectX 11. Okay, everyone's been waiting. We've been promising DX11 forever. I mean, these poor gamers. I mean, we show pictures of BioShock, and it's like, okay, when's it happening? When's it happening?
Yep.
Anyway, I think I've got kids now since we started talking about this. But anyway, why is DX11 so hard? Like, what makes that architecture unique compared to DX9?
As I mentioned before, we have all those different shaders, starting with the vertex shader, the geometry shader, the tessellation shaders, the compute shader. I didn't even think that we had to include that, and also eventually the pixel shader. We had to care about all this. Any buffer code, if you set a constant buffer to this shader, that shader, that shader, we had to care about this, and then we had performance issues. Multi-threading comes with DirectX 11 also. That means the device can be, can be multi-threaded, and that all we had not in DirectX 9, and we had to care about this, and especially about the performance also, and that was why it took so long. Yeah,
we are really lucky because do you remember when you first shared, like, it was videos we were talking about performance and optimizing, and we were really concerned because the first time you did this, when we were rendering with Vireo Perception, it was like a 30% of the 2D performance. Do you remember that? Like, it was, and you were like, okay, well, we're stuck with it, and then, but fortunately, something else happened. Maybe you could release, so that the gamers can relax. What kind of performance are we getting out of it?
Oh, about 60%, I think. 60%. We have a video online that shows that we lose about 35%.
That's actually, I thought it would be more, but that's actually really good because you're rendering a left-right view and you're only losing between 30-40% on the render.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for watching Neil's Messy Basement. Next week, of course, we'll have a lot more to show. Do you have an opinion to share? Post in our forums. Is there something you want to see? Post in the forums. Do you want to visit my messy basement virtually? By all means, email neilsmessybasement@mtbs3d.com. We'd love to welcome you. So this is Neil Schneider from Meant to Be Seen. Thanks for visiting. We'll talk again next week.